Alright, doing my best to drop some balanced thoughts on day one of Marathon. And I'm actually not going to focus massively on the gameplay itself because we kind of got that in the server slam. Some people really like the game, and a lot of people bounced away from the game. There are numerous reasons for this, obviously, between the art style, the systems, the PvP focus, and difficulty level of Marathon. I think we can safely say at this point that Marathon probably isn't a game for the general market, at least not in the same way that something like Arc Raiders is, right? So we kind of know where Marathon is in terms of gameplay. One thing I really like about Marathon, especially once you've put a few hours into it, is that it kind of feels like Bungie really know what they wanted to do with this game, and they do it in a very unapologetic way. And for me, eventually, yes, it took time, that makes Marathon a really interesting experience. I don't know how invested I'll be in Marathon in a month's time or 3 months' time, but nonetheless, we're going to speak about how day one for the launch has actually gone. Initial ratings for the full game launch actually appear to be pretty good. Across most platforms, it has kind of 4.5 to 5, or around a 90% positive rating. And versus the server slam where, yeah, the ratings weren't so high, at this point, most of the people jumping in are those that have been sold on Marathon, right? So these review scores aren't massively surprising. Player numbers, oh my god, I know. Like it or not, these are important. The day one peak was 88,000 players. That is of course lower than the server slam peak, which I think was around 140,000 players. A lot lower than something like Arc Raiders. But for the kind of game Marathon is, I feel like this is actually a solid start. However, I also feel like this number needs to grow from here. So what happens over the course of the weekend I think will be important. We know that the production costs for Marathon have been very high. Paul Tassi reported a few months back that Bungie set a sky-high internal goal for Marathon's launch, indicating that the studio was aiming for nothing less than a top 5 spot on the NPD sales chart for the year, for the game to be considered a true success. We don't really know exactly how much Marathon actually costs to produce, and we don't know how much revenue it's making based on these sales, but making a somewhat crude comparison to Destiny 2, when Edge of Fate dropped, player numbers there were considered to be a lot lower than what Bungie would like to see, and those player numbers were just shy of 100,000 on day one. That, of course, was only around a third of what the final shape produced, at a little over 300,000 players on Steam. And we know that Sony actually reported on Destiny 2 in their financial statements following Edge of Fate with that 100,000 players, indicating that it had not produced the kind of revenue that they wanted it to. Of course, Marathon is a brand new game, and I think it's reasonable to assume that the production costs for Marathon were indeed higher than those of the Edge of Fate and Year of Prophecy, so that's all I can really say on it initially. I am concerned that this will not be enough for a massive AAA studio like Bungie, who've both suffered with Destiny 2 sales since the Sony acquisition, Sony themselves stating that this was not good enough essentially, and now the same appears to be happening with Marathon. I could be completely wrong, my analysis could be doo-doo, and while I think just shy of 90,000 players for day one on Marathon is a good start, if it doesn't grow, my concern about what this means for Bungie certainly will. Let's get into some other crazy stuff that happened on day one of Marathon. Bungie promises that data miners who leak spoilers from the Marathon game files will have their content taken down across social platforms, YouTube and other sites. So Bungie taking a pretty hard line against data mining in Marathon. I don't believe Marathon has a public API, which certainly makes it different from Destiny, and the majority of early info would have to be literally extracted from the game files, and Bungie is saying, no, don't do it. Something else here, Anti-Real, the artist whose artwork was originally used in the closed alpha for Marathon without permission, is now credited in Marathon as a visual design consultant. Obviously, we know that Anti-Real and Bungie came to an agreement, and ultimately she was paid for the work that was used in Marathon, and it appears that perhaps some other degree of consultancy occurred following that, where Anti-Real was ultimately working for Bungie in some capacity. It did make me chuckle though, visual design consultant. Nonetheless, I'm glad that Bungie made it right with Anti-Real. Other funkiness on day one. If you're having trouble launching Marathon on Steam, please try restarting the Steam client. Players have also had to wait a little while to get server slam rewards and pre-order bonuses, as well as Twitch drops. Plus, they were investigating an issue where Deluxe Edition items were not available in-game for some players. Not trying to hammer on Bungie, but most games release and you just get the stuff that you bought. I'm not sure why we always see this sort of thing with Bungie. There were also issues where the premium currency Lux was not going to accounts after being charged on Steam. Bungie have been looking into that. I think they've resolved some issues, but others persist. There was actually a crazy exploit on day one where if you had the deluxe edition, you'd get 200 free silk. But if you spend that silk and then actually restart the game, it reappears, which is wild. Silk kind of acts like bright dust in Destiny where you can earn it by playing the game, but you do actually have to use it to get your deluxe pass items, which is a little bit engagement baity, but whatever. Either way, thanks to this exploit, many players have actually finished the rewards pass, me included. Something a lot of players didn't notice though, probably more game breaking, but but some of the gold items on that pass actually gave credits as well. So as I restarted the game 2 or 3 times to get all of the currency, I also earned like 10,000 credits, which, like I said, is a bit more game breaking. Not intentional, but pay to win. I mean, actually, yeah, just a little bit at least, because I could spend those credits on guns and stuff. Can't say which platforms this works on or whether it still works, but it was a thing on day one, which is at least a bit of a blunder. Talking about microtransactions though, Marathon has skins for the runners. There's one here called White Rabbit. There was actually an offer on this one at the time where it was 1,500 lux, which is the premium currency, although the game suggests typically these should be 2,100 lux. And looking at the costs here, you could buy 2,250 lux for $19.99, so nearly $20, 16 quid here in the UK. And of course, if you were starting from nothing and you had to pay 2,100 lux to get a skin, it essentially means these skins are $20, dude. Each to their own. I'm not judging anyone who would buy this stuff, and I've always been someone who's not massively interested in paid cosmetics, but no way am I buying a skin for 20 bucks. Each to their own, however. Of course, plenty of games do this. Someone else also rounded up something interesting about other cosmetics, stating they had a suspicion about the monetization strategy that Marathon would employ during Server Slam that's now been confirmed by the full release. So stickers and charms, which are weapon cosmetics, have a quantity. They can only be applied to as many weapons at a time as you have duplicates of that specific charm or sticker. This goes for promo stickers and charms as well, like the Twitch drops, or pre-order exclusives. And that means you'll only ever be able to have them equipped on one weapon at a time. It points out the Twitch drop sticker had a quantity of 2, and the pre-order charm cannot be placed on multiple weapons as you're only given 1. Not only does this make customizing weapons feel bad, but they suggest that Bungie also used this as a way to pad out the reward pass with duplicates of the same item, because technically you're getting multiple of it to use on multiple weapons. And they feel that this takes away from how rewarding the pass actually feels to progress through. Getting the same thing twice does not feel like a reward. So some players are describing this as kind of an egregious move. And yeah, I agree, it's kind of unnecessary padding of that rewards pass. Some people will care about that more than others. Like I said, I'm not that bothered about cosmetics. I can just ignore that shit. So for those who really love Marathon and have been excited for it, I think day one has been broadly as good as most of them would have hoped it would be. But I do think the path forward for Marathon is potentially pretty rocky because of the kind of spend that Bungie and Sony have actually put into the production costs of this game. So while I'm not an expert, I can't look into the future. I don't know how much this game cost or how these player numbers transfer to sales revenue and all that. But I feel like Marathon needs to grow its player base in the next couple of weeks. Maybe over the course of this weekend, we will see that happen. But while Steam is only one platform, it does give us an indication of perhaps where things will be on other platforms, and I think genuinely the game needs to get over 100k, and at the very least it needs to hold on to the players it has now, as well as growing that number. So don't want to be all negative or try and make assumptions without the facts, but just based on what we see from other similar successful titles that we know probably have lower production costs than Marathon, and Sony's feels around Bungie in general and their other IP, Destiny 2. Time will tell, but on a commercial level, I don't think the road is necessarily straightforward by any means, although most of you will not be surprised by that. So I've tried to be fair here, cover some of the positives and indeed some of the negatives. Everyone will have their own perception of what this means and whether it's good or bad, so let me know your thoughts below, but we'll keep an eye on it over the weekend. And that's it. If you've enjoyed the video, a rating really does help us out. Hit subscribe, I'll keep you posted with Bungie news, gaming news, Destiny 2 stuff, and plenty more. For now though, cheers for watching, and I hope you have an awesome day.